Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Welcome, everyone, to the Sports Spectrum podcast. I am Jason Romano. It's great to have you joining us here on the show today. Got a great conversation coming up with Ryan Clark, ESPN's NFL analyst and longtime NFL safety, 13 years in the NFL. And Ryan's a good friend, and I think you guys will see that in the conversation that we have on this podcast. But before we get to our interview with Ryan, I want to tell you about a brand new podcast that's coming out December 16th. Really excited about this because it's produced by Sports Spectrum. And the podcast is called Football Sunday, and it features first-person stories from NFL players, current and former players, on how God has worked in their life. And this podcast that you're about to listen to is a longer podcast. It's almost an hour long. But the Football Sunday podcast, they'll be no longer than 10 minutes. So it's really quick. You can digest 2 or 3 of them at a time, maybe on a commute. And it features players like Drew Brees and Matt Hasselbeck, Kirk Cousins, guys like Thomas Davis, Benjamin Watson, Prince Amukamara. These NFL players, current and former players, telling their story of how God has worked in their life. They're the ones talking in this podcast. I'm not interviewing them. They're not being interviewed. They're just sharing their story. And I think you guys will really be encouraged by the Football Sunday podcast. It debuts Monday, December 16th with 3 episodes. You can subscribe right now everywhere podcasts are found. Just search Football Sunday Podcast. Hit that subscribe button and you're in. Never miss an episode. It's awesome. It's going to run for about 8 weeks, culminating with the Monday after the Super Bowl, February 3rd. Subscribe today to the Football Sunday Podcast. Ryan Clark joins us here on Sports Spectrum. Ryan, as I mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, 13 years in the NFL with the Giants, Redskins, and Steelers from 2002 to 2014. Played in 2 Super Bowls, won a Super Bowl in January of 2009, Super Bowl 43 against the Arizona Cardinals. Was a Pro Bowler in 2011 at the age of 32, which I thought was a really cool thing when he made it to the Pro Bowl for the first time, and he was in his early 30s. He'd been in the league for almost 10 years. And in February of 2015, he announced his retirement from the NFL and signed just a couple weeks later with ESPN. And that's where I think a lot of you may remember Ryan. You may not remember him playing, and we talk about this in the podcast. You might know him more for ESPN. He's on shows like Get Up with Mike Greenberg and NFL Live and SportsCenter and First Take. So Ryan Clark is a staple on ESPN and one of their important NFL voices, in my opinion. But Ryan's got a whole journey here that we talk about. And him and I met in 2009, I believe it was, when he basically tweeted that he wanted to come on First Take and debate Skip and Stephen A. And I saw it, called him, we arranged it, and he came to ESPN and he debated those guys. And not a lot of people knew Ryan at that point. They knew him obviously as a safety with the Steelers, but I think from that moment, people were impressed with Ryan Clark on air. And we brought him back a bunch of times at ESPN to have him do different studio days. He even interned in the off season before he finished out his career in the NFL and then got a job, and he did it right. He worked his way up. He wasn't the 12-time Pro Bowler who just got to ESPN because of his name. Like, he worked his tail off, and now he's one of their best analysts. And I'm proud to know him. He's a buddy. He's a friend. And I think you'll love our conversation with ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark here on Sports Spectrum. Ryan, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Oh man, I'm so excited. This should have taken place a long time ago, but it's good to get it done now.
Listen, I'm embarrassed almost to even say that we've been doing this podcast for a couple of years and we haven't had you on yet, but there's so much to talk about, and you and I can even talk about our friendship and all that too, but there's so much to talk about with what's happening with you. But I think the first thing is, you have now joined the 40-year-old club, my friend. How are you handling being 40? Last month you turned 40 years old.
Yeah, I'm pretty annoying, I think, to everybody, Jay, because what I tell everybody, once you're 40, you're so much smarter than all those people that are in their 30s.
Yes.
And my wife is 39. And so I kind of hang it over her head every time she says I'm wrong or she thinks she knows something better than I do. I'm like, but baby, you don't really know because you're not 40. And I try to explain to her that once you're 40, man, you're just smarter than anybody who isn't. And so it's been good, man. I think, Jay, you realize every time you get another year, though, just how fast they go by.
Yes.
And how much can happen within that time. And so it's just, man, truly a blessing to be 40, to be healthy, and, to get to see my kids and my family and friends, grow and prosper and be successful and kind of be here through the hard times as well. You start to realize, man, that every moment is really important.
Well, the kids are the ones that really age you. I mean, I joke, and my daughter is 15 now, and we'll go on Facebook, and they have these memories on the Facebook app, and it'll pop up what you posted, I don't know, 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 6 years ago. And it's one good thing about Facebook really is you see this sort of, trajectory of your kids growing up, and, they were once 5 and 6 and 8. And even this morning I was showing Sarah some pictures of when we went to Disney like 11 years ago when she was, 4 years old, and now she's 15. It really, when you watch it through the lens of your kids, that's where you start to feel like, man, this is going by way too fast, right?
Yeah, I looked at a picture. My profile pic is actually an alter ego Christmas card that we did. And I want to say we did it in 2012. And I was showing it to somebody, and I was looking at my kids, and they were like, well, how long ago was this? And I had to go look it up because I now have a junior in in college. I have a freshman in college. I also have a freshman in high school. And they were just babies in this picture. And it really, I don't think we see the age on our face as much as we see the age and growth in them. And then that makes us feel older. But I know for me, though, my son's away. My daughter is at school here, but she no longer lives at home. As a dad, man, when you get those text messages where they're just checking in or they're checking on you, or my daughter text me and is like, hey, Dad, can I FaceTime you later? She's not even like, I miss my dad. She's like, I just miss my guy.
Mm-hmm.
When you get things like that, that's when you actually start to feel old, because you feel how full you are when they say these things. It's like watching a Tom Rinaldi piece on a Sunday.
That's right. All the tears are flowing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So those things are absolutely amazing.
Ryan Clark's joining us here on Sports Spectrum. What has this been like for you post-NFL career as this broadcaster? I mean, you and I go back to when you were playing with the Steelers, and I remember having you, I think it was on First Take with Skip and Stephen A. back in the day, and seeing that, yeah, this guy's got a lot of, potential to be good on air, but this thing is kind of blown up for you, and all of a sudden you're featured on Get Up, and you're having these opportunities to really shine as a broadcaster. What's that been like, watching this whole broadcast journey kind of grow for you in the last 4 or 5 years?
It's been crazy, Jay, and this will probably be the first time I ever say this out loud, in a conversation that can be heard other than the two people. Like, I don't know if I was happy doing it for a little while.
Yeah.
I just, and you were a part of how I became, or how I got the opportunity. If not for you making that call and getting me up in the First Take the first time, maybe my post-career life is different.
Sure.
But
yeah.
I put work in, and I really wanted to do this job. I thought it was something that could be fun, and it just ended up being something different than what I thought. I come from a world of wins and losses. I come from a world where once you step off of your field of play, or once you get out of, what your job is or your occupation is, if you won or lost.
Yeah.
And I didn't have that anymore. And so you were basically depending on other people and a subjective opinion to let you know how you did. And that was difficult for me, because as a guy who was undrafted, a guy who was the underdog, there was always some accomplishment in what God allowed me to do because I worked hard.
Right.
When I was named the starter, when they called my name in the tunnel, I hoped, I listened to Nick Foles yesterday, and he was beautiful and eloquent in how he put it. Like, I hoped, and then there was never my identity, but I did have a part of identity in working hard, accomplishing something, and getting to know how I did, whether I won or lost. I was okay with that. And so it was a little hard for me there. And then I also own a business. And, I'm an owner, I'm a partner. But we have three other partners. Obviously, we have one CEO who owns the majority of the company. But you become an owner or something, you're like, I'm going to get to make all these decisions. I'm going to get to do all this. My ideas will be heard. And even if you have a great idea, sometimes it's just your great idea. And other people don't feel the same thing. And so for a little while, it was some discontentment. It was a bit of not being satisfied with waking up and doing what I was doing every morning. And I think that's why it's super cool that you asked me this question, because earlier this year, Jay, man, like I just gave it all to God. And
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to do things that make me happy. I'm going to wake up in the morning, and if it's to do Get Up, if it's to do First Take, if it's to do NFL Live, I'm going to take control of my voice. And it wasn't that they make you say certain things.
Right.
It was that, you try to do things in a way that professionally reflected what your boss is or what ownership kind of wanted a show to be. Like NFL Live is supposed to be a certain way. Sports Center is supposed to be a certain way. Get Up is supposed to be a certain way. And what I decided to do was like do it my way. And if it works for them, then it does. But if it doesn't, then it wasn't meant to be. And I've been happier that way. I've started to create some things outside of that with my training, with podcasts, with doing different things that has truly kind of helped me, feel like I wake up in the morning and I have some control over what's going on in the wins and losses. And it's really been a blessing to kind of get here.
Well, it's joy, it sounds like, because Nick was talking about that in that clip that you're referring to, Nick Foles with the Jaguars, about how he found joy in the midst of being injured and being out for weeks at a time. And a lot of people can't understand that. And I think, as believers, and I don't want to just say people who are believers can understand it, but I believe that true joy is found, obviously in a relationship with the Lord. And when he said that, that made me think about what you just said, because it sounds like you have joy right now in what you're doing.
No, I really do. I really do, Jay. And I think, we don't, as football players, a lot of times you don't get to feel. You don't get to really look at, okay, because my thought process was, I know so many guys who are now out of ball who don't have something to go to every day, who don't have, whether it's, TV, training, another job, who don't have something they get to wake up and do to keep them active, to keep them busy, to take their mind off of what other things could be going wrong. And I had those things. And so I thought that my job as a believer, my job as a man, was to be excited that God had blessed me with something, and so I didn't want to question it. I didn't want to be discontent. I didn't want to be a guy who wasn't grateful for these things. But I also had to realize that you have to do things in a way that stays true to yourself.
Yeah.
You got to do things in a way that allow you to feel that you have a creative power over your thoughts. And so that was important to me, and whether it's selfish or not, I don't know, but you feel like you played football 13 years, you were always a part of a team. You always did everything that team needed, but it's okay to do everything that team needs and still be an all-pro individually. And I had to, and I had to get to that point, post-career.
So post-career, I think a lot of people watch you on ESPN and they maybe don't realize the kind of career that you had playing in the NFL. 13 years is a long time, and you won a Super Bowl and played in 2 Super Bowls and made the Pro Bowl, and you had a good career. Is it weird though, kind of being, I don't know if it's the right wording, but being more known or more recognized post-career for work that you're doing on ESPN than for being 13 years in the NFL? Is that weird?
It's strange. I think it's strange, Jay, because if I'm being honest, I'd want to be more known for football.
Yeah.
And not in like a arrogant, cocky way, but it was my first love. If you asked me when I was 10, what job would you want to do for the rest of your life? I'd be like, I want to play football. And so, when you have a passion like that for something, it would be awesome to be recognized more for it. But I think, that was always the great thing about football. When you play with people like Sean Taylor, God rest his soul, and, You play with future Hall of Famer Troy Polamalu. Even if you're really good, that will probably go overshadowed. And
Right.
so the beauty in playing football for me was, and being known, was that my peers recognized me, or Coach LeBeau and these, Coach Tomlin. So that was cool. And so now I look at it as such a blessing that I've moved on to something else, though, and people recognize the work I put into that as well. And it's almost weird though that I get, hey man, you're the guy from ESPN. Hey man, I see, like I don't, First Take's not my show, but people are like, man, you're the
Right.
First Take guy. And it kind of makes me chuckle, but it also lets me know how different it is when people can see your face and when people can actually listen to your thoughts, because now you become more than a number to them, more than a logo on a helmet. Like, that is a representation of you. And I think by being recognized, I now feel like I don't just represent a company. When I'm speaking, I represent myself. When I'm talking about football, people don't necessarily view that as this is his analysis and opinion on football. People view it as this is how this person sees life. You get the things of, oh, you hate this team or you hate this player. And in my thoughts, I'm like, nah, I don't hate that player. Like, he just threw a bad football. But, you
Right.
start to realize how much people internalize these words and then perceive you from them. And that's been something to me that I think is monumental, because, and you read the word, you preach the word, there's power in the tongue. And the
Yeah,
things
there really
and the
is.
things you speak, they manifest in reality. And so for me, I've taken it as, you know what, Jay, I got a responsibility too. I got a
Yeah.
responsibility. And so it's been really kind of, dope that through that I've learned, or through being recognized, I've also understood the responsibility that comes along with it.
Yeah, there's a platform that comes with it. And I think that there are some guys who recognize that and others who don't realize that. And that's not just from broadcasting or even sports. I think in anyone who has a platform, like, there's a responsibility that comes with that. Have you seen more from an overall perspective, because I know you have sort of a love-hate, maybe love right now, but had a love-hate relationship with Twitter for many years, for many years. Partially, I'm to blame for that, but that's a platform where people can use to really either uplift and be positive, or they can completely tear people down. And I'm sure you've experienced that just being an influencer.
Yeah.
So what is that responsibility? Can you go a little deeper with that?
I think, we're in a society now that's different. We're in a society that now, that racism and bigotry and evil and hate and a
Yeah.
lot of these things that I think were hidden, in a way, like, they are no longer hidden. And, we're in a society now that people are mistreated and disrespected for some things they can't control. And
Right.
you have to have a voice of, one, positivity, but also a voice of truth, honesty, and reality. And I think that there is a huge responsibility in that. And now on my current job and the way that we choose to do business, like, politics isn't a thing that we talk about or are
Right.
necessarily allowed to talk about. And I think it's good in a way, and bad in others. I think the good is, like, you never say anything that gets you fired. So that's the
That's important.
so that's the good thing. I think too, sometimes the bad in that is there are some misrepresented voices that don't get to be heard, that I believe we could help be heard. And so that responsibility weighs heavy sometimes in certain situations. And I think the other side of it is, the positives, man, is when we see good things. Like, when you see, I don't know Nick Foles. I've never met Nick Foles, right?
Yeah.
Nick Foles' message wasn't my message. I don't get to take ownership of his words, but I do get to agree with them. You know, I do
Yes.
get to
Yep.
believe them. I do get to understand them. And by, whether it's retweeting it, by amening it, by getting an opportunity to share it with the people I get an opportunity to share it with, I get to say, one, I respect what he says. Two, I agree with what he says. 3, I would also like other people to hear what he says. Not necessarily agree. You don't have to feel like he was right, but I felt like it was something that people could hear and for themselves draw something out of it. And so I think we get an opportunity, and I'm sure like the beauty about what he did was he didn't do it for anyone. It was his truth. But so many people, at least I believe, can be touched, can be moved, but also just be educated by that. And we get those opportunities through Twitter. I know the people that reposted it. Obviously, I saw that you reposted it as well. Like, they heard that word, they felt something, and social media allowed somebody like me who honestly, like, I didn't see it, Jay. You know what I mean? I didn't see it happen live. I don't get Jacksonville TV or whatever it is. And it's just, and it's not necessarily something that is going to run on ESPN. But because other people saw it, because you saw it, because you got a chance to repost it, I saw it. And I just think that is the beauty in it. And then, like I was told that I probably shouldn't respond to negative comments, but I do. And the reason I do is this, and I've said it before, it's not always like life's not always great. Not everyone is going to think everything you do is the best, but that's okay. Like that's part of it. And I respond to them sometimes, and I make fun of them, and I joke with them, and sometimes I actually answer their questions because sometimes they're just people on the other end who are unhappy, who are miserable, who are going through things, who also want people to feel their misery, or who are just happy you actually answered. And so I try to do it all there. If something is disrespectful or frustrating or insulting, I just don't answer it. But as long as it's not, you just go along and move along with life.
Well, I think, too, when you have an allegiance to a specific team and they want to come at you, like with LSU and Alabama last week, and we're running this in a couple of weeks, and I can't believe I neglected to start this podcast with the LSU win, but that's all it seems like you've been talking about on social media, on ESPN. But that's a great chance to be humble but still brag at the same time, right, and have fun with people. And then, but being able to see, hey, people can take this a little too seriously too.
Oh yeah, hey, 100%. People really, really, really take this seriously, and it's so funny, Jay, is that like if you see me really when I'm off air and people ask me about LSU, I don't behave that way.
No, I know.
It's one of those things that when it's almost like you're combating the energy you get from people believing that the LSU Tigers couldn't do it. It was like, man, if people are going to say Tua and Saban and all of these guys are this, then I got to make sure I stand up for my boys and stand up that I believe in them. And, and then on the other end of it, OJ, like I was honest. I see the way it's setting up. They're number 5 right now. If we end up being number 1, they could be 4. We could play in the playoffs. I don't want to play them again. Right. And like people from here are like, why not be happy or why not have confidence in your team? Having confidence doesn't make me stupid. Like I know how good Nick Saban could be, how good that team could be. But to hear some of the ways people come at you about their team, quote unquote, when they didn't play there nor go to school there is kind of funny. But, you take it all and you understand it. As long as people don't get racist, then I'm pretty cool about it.
Yeah, but you see it from I think a lot of alums, but you see it with alums. Marcus Spears obviously was hilarious watching him react to the LSU win as well. But you see it almost like the players themselves become the fans, and you see how you can appreciate maybe more. I don't know, maybe I'm way off on this, but you can appreciate why a Steelers fan would go absolutely insane on a win or a loss when you were playing. Maybe you didn't quite understand it as a player, but when you see your alum go through that, you become that fan.
Yeah, I think you do, but I still believe it's different. Okay. And I'll try to explain it the best way I know how. My wife asked me driving home the other day. I was driving home from the airport. We were on the phone, and she's like, "Do you have allegiance to any team?" Because like if the Steelers aren't playing well, I say it. The Giants, the Redskins, teams I've all played for, I'll say it. And I was like, yeah, LSU. And she's like, that's strange to me because we live in Baton Rouge. I don't really go to a lot of games. I don't go to a lot of like LSU alumni events. Like I'm not really into all those things. Like you never look at my social media and see me post pictures when I played at LSU. You know, you see so many.
And your son's playing at Arizona State.
Right. Yeah.
So there's that too.
Well, but that's not even part of it. You know, like I just, you know, like leading into this game, I follow a lot of former Alabama players, a lot of former LSU players. Everybody posted a picture, or most people posted a picture of themselves from that game in order to say good luck or how important that game was to the people playing now. I don't see it that way. Like my time is up. You know, like I don't need to post a picture of me in an LSU uniform to remind myself nor anybody else that I played there. Because the thing is, I chose LSU. I could have been at Alabama. I could have been at Florida. I could have been at Tennessee. I could have been at Memphis, Arizona, all these other schools that offer me scholarships. I chose LSU. So the reason I feel a certain way about LSU is because I made that choice. The reason you feel a certain way about your wife is because you made a choice for her. Right. You know, you had a feeling about her and you said, you know what, this is where I want to be. I had a feeling. It's not obviously not the same level of love, but or commitment, but I had a feeling that I wanted to be LSU and I made that choice. So I get to be that way. Like if I internalize the feeling, I think the other thing, Jay, that makes it different, and I'm not discounting fans in any way, is I'm not an LSU fan because I live in Louisiana. I'm an LSU fan because I started 39 games there. I spent 4 years there in this hot sun, baking and melting, playing there. I'm also an LSU fan, and I feel a certain way is because I'm there pretty much every day during training camp. And I go to meetings and I go to practice. And when these boys have a bad game, I call and check on them and I text them and I talk them through things and I mentor them. And so I just think it's different. Even though when they lose, I don't go crazy, you know, like when they lose, I try to protect them. When they lose, I build them up. When they have a bad game, I check on them. And so, no, I to be honest, I don't understand why fans behave the way they do. I don't understand like why just because you live in Pittsburgh or because your grandfather was a Steeler fan, you get to behave in the manner that you do. I don't get it. Right. I never will. It'll probably never be okay to me. But I do understand the beauty in 60-something thousand people standing up at Heinz Field because they love nothing more than the Pittsburgh Steelers and Renegades on the screen, and how loud it is when Tom Brady's trying to figure out where the heck Troy is going while I'm still trying to figure out where the heck Troy is going, you know? And so I do recognize that, but it is hard when I see some of the things that people say to these young men when I know all they're trying to do is be their best.
Yeah, I've completely changed that. I used to be that guy when I was 20 years old, and then when I came to ESPN,
no way.
Well, I didn't become a Christian until I was 26, so you wouldn't have liked me much, Ryan, before that time when I was rooting my Dallas Cowboys on in the 90s. Let's put it that way. But I understand now when you meet these guys, and I think most people who would say something like this in social media, let's say when you were playing, Ryan, you're a bum. How could you make that play? If they met you, first of all, they'd never say it to your face. I don't believe that. Number two, I think they'd actually start to change in how they view a game when they meet these guys and have a conversation and understand they're just people who are doing a job. Yeah, they're on TV every week, but they're just people who are doing a job and trying. You and I know each other real well. I know that, you had things that you've gone through in your life, in terms of relationships and having kids and all that. And that's real life stuff. And so I meet you, I know that. And so when I watch you play in the game, I'm like, all right, I hope Ryan does well. If he beats the Cowboys, which you did a few times, and I just got to kind of deal with that. But I know you're a real person.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And I think having that perspective is what's great about continuing to live. Even now that I meet people, and even though I'm out of ball, and they sit down and they have conversations with you, I think it helps them understand those things. It helps them, because most people that remember me playing, all they can think about is Willis McGahee. And then when they talk to me,
big hit against the Ravens,
right? And then when they talk to me, they're like, "Oh, you're not that bad." I'm like, no, I'm not mean all the time.
Right. You were just a tough player on the field, and people see that, and
Yeah.
they automatically identify you as that person. It completely makes sense. Ryan Clark's our guest here on Sports Spectrum. We are the intersection of sports and faith. We obviously have talked a little faith in the way that we've had our conversation, but I don't know if I've ever even heard this from you. What is your testimony? Where did your faith really become real to you and kind of start to become a priority in your
You
life?
know what's crazy, Jay, is like I grew up with like a mother, man, who like I never had a Halloween. Like I never trick or treated as a kid, right? Because we did like
Yeah.
a church lock in. You know, she still goes to church like when my kids are looking for her and she doesn't answer the phone, they all go, she's just probably in church. My son was like, when he was a little kid, he's like, Mommy, is all you listen to is God music? And so I grew up in the church, and then you get to college and you have Fellowship of Christian Athletes and all these things. I was baptized really young, Southern Baptist, but then man, I got to the league, and I can be honest, I didn't go away from God. I was at Bible study every Monday night at Mike Barrow's house. I went to chapel, but you do start to make decisions and live in the way that isn't according to the word. And
Yeah.
I knew that, and I will be honest, as a believer, as someone who grew up in church and understand the preaching of the word and understood the Bible, I can say it right now. I took advantage of grace and mercy, and I took advantage of forgiveness and the blood of Jesus Christ. I took advantage of it all because I was like, well, no matter what I do, I can get on my knees at night and I'll be forget. I be honest. I used my knowledge of it and my misunderstanding of the word, because I can't call it understanding. It was a misunderstanding of the word to
Yeah.
rationalize certain things I did. And it really wasn't until I got married, Jay, and I really accepted Christ for me, not because my mom went to church and did those things, where I started to try to gain a full understanding and live it more than just read it. Um, and I remember the year I got sick was 2007. I had the sickle cell crisis in Denver. I was searching not necessarily for a different word, but I was just searching for like deeper meaning. And I started going to a Greek Orthodox Christian monastery with Troy. Troy's Greek Orthodox Christian, and just because I just want
We're talking
Troy
about Troy
Polamalu.
Polamalu for
Yeah,
those that don't know.
yeah,
Yeah.
Troy Polamalu, and I would go, and they read the word so literal. And you've been to different places where they preach the word and where they're teaching, and all that stuff is good, but it was like, man, this is just like pure Bible. And it was about a lot of prayer and a lot of reflection, and I spent more time with God than I ever had. Well, I get sick, and there is this day where like I thought I was dying. Like I was like, this is it. Like I'm out of here. And I remember saying a prayer, Jay, and the prayer was just that God protected my wife, that he found her someone good, but he couldn't be more attractive than me. That was my only stipulation. That, that,
I
yeah,
understand.
you know what I mean? That's all I cared about. That my kids were taken care of, and that my soul was washed clean and my sins were forgiven. And I remember
Yeah.
feeling really sick, and I was shaking and I was cold, and it all just stopped. And it stopped in the moment I said I was ready. I was like, I'm ready. And I just remember how close I felt to God then. And this is something I can share with you. That's what got me through that time. And what's crazy
Yeah.
is, Jay, like you think that you would come out of that time and never fall back again, right? You
Hmm.
think that because you went through that and you had this closeness with God and He brought you through it, that the flesh and the spirit will never war again. Right? I'll be honest. I left the hospital, Jay, and I was like, man, I will never have another problem with the word in my life. I
Hmm.
said I will never be attacked by demons again, because I was like, dude, you just went through that and God brought you through that. So there's no way you're ever going to let these things affect your spirit again. There's no way you're going to let the words of another man, the words of another woman, no way you're going to let a relationship in life come before Christ, because you went through that. And honestly, Jay, that complacency allowed that battle to continue in my life. And
Hmm.
I get it, man. It's like, hey, you gave your life to Christ. He brought you through something. And that's why Nick Foles' word touched me. And it touched me in a different way, because I'm not really thinking of my trials. Like kind of after dealing with that experience, like trials and adversity are very minuscule to me. I'm just thinking about living the word, preaching it through my life and affecting others. I haven't always done that. There are
Yeah.
times in my life that I can say if someone I've been to Bible study with, or someone I've studied with, or if my mother or other people who I know in Christ would see me now, they wouldn't recognize me. And that has been, it's made me sad. I've had to grow from that, but I know those times. And so I'd love to get on here and be like, man, there's no battle between spirit and flesh with me anymore, but there is. And it's taught me, Jay, I got to stay steadfast in the word. Like, this is not this isn't a walk for me that doesn't involve time with Jesus Christ. Because when I'm not giving him that time, when I'm making work more important, when I'm making, starting a career, having a successful career more important than Christ, more important than my marriage, more important than my family, then I'm failing. And there are times that I do that because ego and success and fleshly, worldly things become more important. And God has to shake me and humble me and get me back on it. And I understand that this is a battle for me forever. And I only win when I put him first. And I think I was excited when I got an opportunity to do this, because I think we all hear and love the success stories. The people who say, they gave their life to Christ, and ever since then it's been this, and it's been heaven, and it's been that. That hasn't been the story for me, and not from a success and kind of like Nick Foles said, and prosperity standpoint, because I have that, but from a true joy in life, because true life is living in his way. And I haven't always done that, and I'm not proud of that, but I am to a point in life where, Jay, I can get on with someone like you, who, one, I truly respect, who, two, I truly value, and say, man, that, some of it has been a struggle for me. And I think some of that struggle played into my discontentment with work, and with, not necessarily always being the greatest husband. And, and those things I look back on now, and I'm so sad that I wasted time on not having him first and not having that joy to spread that joy to others.
First of all, thank you for that answer, because I think transparency is something that's missing just in general, and we ask for it, and then when transparency comes, a lot of us can't handle it. But I think in the faith world, that's vital, because if we're trying to put on a mask of happiness and everything's great and God is good and pointing to the sky, I'm just using metaphors from a sports perspective, then I think we're missing it. I think what you just said to me is the real battle that most people have, and they just don't want to necessarily admit it. I try to be that way. It's very easy to paint, and you know this because we're both out there. It's very easy to paint an Instagram, social media world where everything's perfect and everything's great. And I even posted. We're taping this the day after we just celebrated, my wife and I, our 20th wedding anniversary, and I posted a picture of us from. Man, I was looking real young back in the day, no gray hair or anything. But I posted this picture, and I think underneath it, and I'm excited that we were able to celebrate 20 years, but I put, we don't have this marriage thing figured out, but I'm glad we're trying to do it together.
I love that.
And I think,
I love that.
But it's because it's true, and I don't. And if I tried to say I have this figured out, I'm lying, because I struggle every day in the marriage of trying to treat my wife like the queen that she needs to be treated, respecting her, loving her in a way that she deserves to be loved. I struggle with that, just being real here, but we're still doing this together. We haven't gotten to the point where we don't want to be with each other anymore. Thank God.
Yes, thank God.
And,
I understand, man.
Yeah.
I get it, man. Yeah. And
but that's real life. That's what my point is. And I'm so glad that you said what you said.
Yeah, Jay, I think, and I'm telling you, I've been excited about it and nervous at the same time. I get all these because people see the outside, right? They see the success. They know I love the Lord. They know that I'm in church and I'm praying and I'm reading. And so everybody's like, man, you should do this and you should speak here and you should do these things. And I just remembered especially being younger, I remember being not ashamed, but feeling undeserving to get to do those things.
Yeah.
Because most of the time when I heard those things, when I was in church, or a lot of times when I was at Bible study and different, you know, different Bible meetings, no one was saying those things. The people leading the meetings or leading the Bible studies or the preacher, he wasn't saying he himself was going through these struggles. So I almost felt wrong, and I felt like, how am I going to stand in front of people and preach this walk or talk about this walk when I know how much I'm struggling myself sometimes? And there's just there's something in the freedom of knowing that you're in a fight that God understood, right? Like
Yes.
the reason that Jesus Christ died is because God understood this fight. It wasn't that the
Absolutely.
blood of Jesus was going to take that fight away from us. It wasn't that it wasn't going to be hard, or that there wasn't going to be a battle every day, or it was just that, hey, I'm giving you this blood of Jesus so you can always know that I am here, that I have sacrificed. And it's been important for me to accept that.
Last couple questions here with Ryan Clark on Sports Spectrum. Really appreciate your transparency there, Ryan, and it's been fun to catch up. Can I talk a little football with you? Because
Absolutely.
I love the faith side, but
Absolutely.
I just like talking football with you. And I think from your career, stories are always my favorite. So, let me tell a quick Ryan Clark story from my own perspective. And you might not even remember this, but we were at the Super Bowl. You played against the Packers. It's the one that you didn't win, obviously, and that's never a good memory. But it was a horrible week in Dallas that week. Cold, snowy, like you felt like you were in Minnesota, not in Dallas, Texas during the middle of the January. And I remember going over to pick up Hannah Storm, and we were going to the stadium in Dallas, the big Jerry World, to do it would have been, they called it Media Day then. Now it's, Media Night or whatever. And we're in the hotel and I see you and I wave and I say, "Hey, what's up, Ryan?" And you're like, "Hey, Jay, can I get a ride?"
Yeah.
And you're wearing a white t-shirt. And I'm like, "Why do you need a ride?" And you said, "You needed to go to the hotel to get changed, to get over to Media Day," which is where we were headed. And I'm thinking, this is just Ryan Clark in the lobby of a hotel asking for a ride. That's my Ryan Clark story.
Yeah.
So that's my
Man, it
football
was so
story.
crazy. It was so crazy. My boys were down, man, and they were like, "Hey, man, come over, hang out." And we get ready to go, and the weather's terrible, and you couldn't
Oh, it's
you
awful.
couldn't get a
Couldn't get a
taxi, couldn't
car.
do anything.
Yeah,
And I was like,
exactly.
"Hey, man, can I
Yeah.
catch your ride?" And he was like, "Yeah, bro, come on." I was like, "Oh, awesome." And
Yeah.
that was the day I was like, "Man, it is good to know people." I was like, "It is
Yeah, right,
absolutely."
right. And it was 10 degrees. I was literally on one side holding Hannah Storm, trying to walk through the parking lot of the Cowboys Stadium because it was so full of ice. They don't know how to deal with ice
It
in
was sand,
in
remember?
Texas. Yes, they didn't even have salt, so nothing was melting,
It
and
was
it
sand.
was it was it was brutal. But I wonder for you, because one of my questions, I guess, from a football perspective, is your favorite story, I guess, as a player that stands out, not necessarily on the
Hmm.
field, like an experience, something that you went through. I think as a football player, as we talk football, but I think because you had 13 years in the
Yeah.
league and you play with guys like Sean Taylor and you played in Super Bowls with the Steelers and had some success with the most successful franchise out there in terms of Super Bowl wins with the Patriots. What's a story that you could share that just stands out from your playing
I'll
days
be
that
honest. Like,
maybe wasn't on the
yeah,
field?
my
Yeah.
my story would probably be, I started 4 games at like the nickelbacker for the Giants my second year. Tom Coughlin comes there. He cuts me,
Okay.
and in cutting me, like, I could see it happening. Like, I've always been a very smart player. I messed up one check one day, and they moved me to like the third team. And everybody's coming to me like, "Man, why, Tim Lewis blow up on you like that? Like, you're the smartest guy on the team." I was like, "I don't know, man." So Coughlin brings me in, tells me how I can't play, how I don't have the physical traits to be a safety in this league, how I should look at other work, there are other leagues. He basically tells me all of these things. And so
Wow.
uh,
Just
it was
straightforward saying
straightforward.
that,
And,
huh?
and I tell people all the time, though, it was one of the more beautiful football conversations I've ever had because of his honesty. Tom Coughlin, he was not intentionally trying to insult me. He was not intentionally trying to be mean to me. He was only telling me his facts, his truth, and I respected that. And so I come home and I'm working at LSU. I get married. That was crazy. So I'll get married.
Yeah.
And this story actually involves faith in football, so it's a cool story. I got gifted a book. My mom bought me a book, Power of a Praying Husband. Right.
Yeah.
And when everybody would ask me, was I okay with not playing football? I would always say yes. I was like, yeah, I'm fine, man. I was an undrafted guy. I played 2 years, but I was lying. But I didn't want to enter like marriage and my new life wanting something else. Man, so I get home. My wife's changing jobs because we had to move to Baton Rouge. And I said, God, I hope my wife finds a job. And I was like, and if all possible, can you like give me one more chance to play football? I think it'd be really cool. And so the next day, I go talk to Will Muschamp. I say, Will, how do I sign up to be a GA? What do I have to do? I wanted to go start to coach. He tells me those things. I leave. I get a call. Hey, Ryan, you have a workout tomorrow with the Washington Redskins. My agent calls. I go. They don't pick me initially. I'm in the airport. My phone isn't working. Apparently, the guy they pick gets injured. It doesn't pass the physical, so they bring me back. I pass out almost the first day of camp because I've been working in the office. First cut day rolls by, Jay, and my names are on the final cuts. Oh. And I was like, man, but they didn't call me anything. They didn't call me, didn't bring me in, didn't cut me like professionally. I'm just see my name on TV. So my wife is going crazy. I was reading Job at the time. So I get on my knees and I was like, Lord, you know what? I'm grateful. I asked for a chance. You gave me a chance. I'm ready to go back to work. Man, I bring my stuff into work the next day. I tell everybody goodbye. Greg Williams calls me to his office. He was usually cussing and screaming, crosses his legs. And he's like, again, cussing and screaming. But he's cussing and screaming because the guy who reported that I got cut got it wrong. He guessed. He didn't have the last name. I was the last guy to get there, and he guessed. And he was wrong. And Greg Williams tells me that day, and this is 2 months after Tom Coughlin cuts me, tells me I can't play safety in this league, tells me that, I should try to do other things. And Greg Williams tells me that day, he's like, you're not cut. And he's like, in a matter of fact, if we were picking the team today, you'd make the team and you'd play. And to me, it was just a story of really one team not really giving me a chance. They never saw me play in pads. They never saw me, line everybody up. They just watched me in a couple of mini camp practices and formed this opinion of me and got rid of me. And this other team, who really wasn't even bringing me in to play, was going to be a camp body who they didn't even pick from the workout, sees enough in me in, 2 or 3 preseason games to say, man, this is a dude that can play in this league and not only make this team, but be a part of what we do. And it's just a story of, man, you just never know. Like you keep plugging, you keep working, and you ball. And so obviously I go along and, they sign Adam Archuleta and I go to Pittsburgh and I'm playing really well. And Greg Williams, who is not really a guy that's full of feeling, right? He's not really the softest, most sensitive guy, walks up to me, man, hugs me and goes, I'm just really proud of you. And that was important to me. I'm not probably never going to be associated with Greg Williams a lot. I'll probably always be a Pittsburgh Steeler. But those are the type of football relationships that matter, because if Greg Williams was I want drafted guys, I want them this big, I want them this tall, this fast, I don't play 13 years in the league. But because he gave me a shot and put me on the field, I'm now working for ESPN because of what my football career ended up being.
Right. And that's such a great story, because I think for others, we all go through those moments where we're told it's just not going to work. Sorry, or whatever, or you can't do this or this. We hear that a lot in sports, but I heard that at ESPN, that this isn't going to work. You're never going to be this. And you just kind of deal with it, and that's okay. But you move on. And I always appreciate, I'm like you, I appreciate the honesty of people being upfront with me and not kind of saying, keep going, you might get there someday. No, just tell me, do I have a shot or
right.
No? And if I don't, then at least I can put that in my head and say, okay, I don't agree with that person, but I can move forward knowing that they've believed this way. So let me see if I can find somebody else to believe in me differently. And I think it's a great lesson, man. I really do.
Yeah, I think, I love what you do. I love the conversation we had actually before you left. And you were like, RC, I'm about to go
Yeah.
do this. And it's
Yeah.
just so cool to see it come to fruition. And I think people feel like you can only, like, the way to inspire and motivate is to tell people that they should do a certain thing. And sometimes the way to inspire and motivate is to believe in yourself, do a certain thing, and let other people see your testimony, not necessarily hear it. And so I think it's been super cool, man, to just watch you go and do this and to get an opportunity to be a part of it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And you've been a great just encouragement for me in my journey. And certainly you were one of the few that could understand when I was leaving the real purpose why I was leaving. I struggled for 2 years with wanting to leave ESPN. That was not something I wanted to do. And I remember for the first time going to one of those pro athletes outreach conferences, even while I was working at ESPN, and you were there, and I saw this, and I'm like, oh, this thing is different. This is a real thing that's going on that a lot of people don't know about, with NFL players and current and former players being able to get encouraged in their walk. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your friendship. As we wind down, I want to be mindful of our time. I want to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests here. You may have answered it kind of already, but I think it'll be interesting to see where your mind goes when we ask the question. And it's simply, what are you learning from God right now? What is he teaching you today, late November, mid-November, 2019? What are you learning from the Lord today?
I'm learning that our walk, our journey with God is a conversation, not a sermon. And what I mean by that is I have to continually talk to him, but I also have to listen. I have been, and many times I have been, hey, God, you know what? Listen to me. These are the things I need. These are the things I want. And when those things don't happen, I stop talking. And what he's taught me now is that, the conversation is life. It's not necessarily always talking, but it's like, hey, I want this. I'm going to try to do this. And he's like, you know what? Not right now. You know what? This isn't the time. But here is what you need to do. Here is how you need to do it. And sometimes I might be like, man, God, like, that ain't it. Like, that's not what we talked about. This conversation has changed. And in that, he's taught me to lean on him. And I thank God that it hasn't been about struggle. It hasn't been about making sure my kids can eat, because people have that struggle. But mine has been kind of what you said, making sure you love your wife, making sure you love your kids, making sure the way I'm living says that I put God first. And what he's taught me is that sometimes we wait for motivation to do certain things, to take action, to work, to move. And in a lot of ways, the action is the motivation. If you make the action, if you put the time in, if you work on, whether it's your relationship, if you work on your podcast, whatever it is, if you get out and go do it first, the motivation will come. And he's taught me in this season of my life to stop sitting down and waiting for things to happen.
And I think that's even just for us to be able to talk about this kind of thing, it's God's timing, right? And it's his purpose, but we have to still do it. And then who knows what comes out of it. And who knows, somebody will listen to this and maybe be encouraged in their own walk with the Lord. And that's the whole reason why we would even have this conversation. Ryan Clark, love you, buddy.
Love
I appreciate
you.
I'm so glad you could come on the show, and let's catch up soon. I would like
I'd love to see you, man. Have a good one, bro.
That was Ryan Clark, ESPN NFL analyst, Super Bowl champion, Pro Bowler, longtime NFL safety, and I'm also grateful to say he's a friend of mine, and Ryan's a great dude. If you ever get a chance to run into Ryan Clark and talk to him, I promise you'll come away encouraged. You'll come away a better person because of Ryan Clark, and really thankful for him to come on the podcast and be as open and transparent as he was. He's got a heart for people. He's got a heart for God. And wish him nothing but the best, and look forward to hopefully catching up with him. We are going to be at the Super Bowl this year in Miami for the week, and one of the places that Ryan and I talked about maybe connecting together in person and maybe even being able to do a second interview would be Super Bowl week in Miami. So hopefully we'll catch up with him there. Otherwise, make sure you watch him on ESPN. He's on Get Up and SportsCenter and First Take, and he's bringing the goods there. So check him out on SportsCenter and give him a follow on Twitter and let him know you heard about his story, a really good story, here on Sports Spectrum's podcast. Thanks to Ryan. We also want to, again, remind you of our new podcast debuting Monday, December 16th. It's called Football Sunday, and it's a 12-episode podcast that's going to run about 8 weeks through Monday, February 3rd, the Monday after the Super Bowl. First-person stories from former and current NFL players on how God has worked in their lives. They tell the story. We don't interview them. I'm not asking any questions. This is the athletes themselves telling the story. And we started off on Monday, December 16th with Trent Dilfer, Brandon Marshall, and Drew Brees. And then we bring you episodes and conversations from people like Kirk Cousins, Josh McCown, John Kitna, the Dallas Cowboys coach, former NFL quarterback, Thomas Davis, Nate Solder from the Giants, Benjamin Watson, Prince Amukamara. It's going to be a really cool podcast, and you'll be able to quickly listen to these things because they're only 7 to 10 minutes long, and that's intentional. We know that in investing in a podcast like Sports Spectrum, almost an hour long, can be hard to do. It's a long time to invest. These Football Sunday podcast interviews are 10 minutes long tops, 7 to 10 minutes. And so you can bang out 2 or 3 of them in a commute. You can subscribe today everywhere podcasts are found. Again, search Football Sunday Podcast. We'll also put a link in the show notes in this podcast show notes. And you can subscribe right now so that you never miss an episode, debuting Monday, December 16th. It's the Football Sunday Podcast. Subscribe today. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sports Spectrum with Ryan Clark. Hit us up on our social media pages, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then check out our website, sportsspectrum.com. That's where all of our content can be found, sportsspectrum.com. And a great place to subscribe to our magazine as well. It's Christmas time. You're looking for an idea to give to someone. The Sports Spectrum magazine is the way to go. It's $18. That's it. $18 for an entire year. Gets you a full year subscription to the Sports Spectrum magazine, our quarterly magazine. You get 4 issues plus a couple bonus issues. Great way to stay connected to God through reading stories on the intersection of sports and faith. It's also a great, and I mean great, tool to hand to someone who loves sports and maybe has an interest in God, maybe doesn't believe in God, maybe isn't sure. Man, let him read these stories about the intersection of sports and faith. Jonathan Isaac is on the cover of our brand new magazine right now from the Orlando Magic as we talk about faith and the state of faith in the NBA. Jonathan's a great guy. He's got a great story. So subscribe today over at sportsspectrum.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time right here on Sports Spectrum. Have a great rest of your day.